Hi, my name is John Cyberlick Wheeler. I'm a peer group facilitator for men evolving nonviolently. And today I'm going to share one of about 12 or 14 lessons that we teach in our entry level group called Stop the Violence. And this lesson is called the Rescue Triangle. This is adapted from Karpman's drama triangle, and it's not actually different, but we call it the Rescue Triangle, I think because most of the people who we work with can really identify strongly with the rescuer role. So I'm going to share a diagram of the rescue triangle. Here we go. So here this shows a triangle with three roles. And the roles are the rescuer, the victim, and the persecutor. And these three roles are enacted by two people in relationship with one another. And at Men Evolving Nonviolently, we think of this dynamic as one of the pitfalls that can make connecting in relationship difficult. And so we teach about this to help men increase insight about one way or one model of understanding ways that they engage, so that they might be able to disengage from this dynamic in order to be able to move toward connection and relationship, if we presume that's a goal, and I do. So it's really important to note that the rescuer, the victim, and the persecutor are roles. These are not identities. These are not who people are, but these are roles that we imagine ourselves in, and I think that we do this unconsciously. So this is a way to bring consciousness to it. If you could see yourself in the roles, you can become conscious that you're enacting a role. It gives you a chance to stop enacting that role and to be more conscious about how you engage. So a person who's on the rescue triangle will assume one of the roles without knowing it. And then these arrows in the diagram show the nature that there's shift in roles. So you might have one person who's enacting the rescuer and one person who is enacting the victim, or at least is imagined as a victim by the rescuer. And then those roles shift, and then somebody becomes a persecutor and somebody becomes a victim, and then we need a new rescuer. So to give you an example of how this might look, there's a classic story that we use about a Boy Scout who imagines himself as rescuer, and he sees a little old lady standing on a street corner, and he imagines her as a victim. She doesn't yet imagine herself that way, but that's how he starts out his thinking. And she's standing there facing across the street, and he walks up to her and he says, I'd like to help you cross the street. And she says, no, thank you. And he says, well, I insist. And she said, I really don't want to. And he said, well, never you mind. I'm going to help you across the street. And so he grabs her by the arm, and slowly she moves across the street with him. And when they arrive on the other side, the bus that she was waiting for arrives and departs without her. And upon noticing this, she turns to the Boy Scout and she thumps him on the head with her umbrella and says, you idiot, you made me miss my bus. So in this dynamic, the Boy Scout's the rescuer. He imagines the little old lady as a victim, and so he rescues her across the street. And then she thumps him on the head. And so she's transitioned out of victim into the persecutor role. And now she's attacking him. And in that moment, he shifts from rescuer into the victim role. And he wonders why she's hitting him. So that's a little bit abstract for folks who are in a more personal relationship, but it's a good example to show how people can embody the roles and then shift out of them. So I want to give a second example of two people in relationship. So imagine that a wife comes home from work at the end of the day, and her husband also got off work and came home recently. And she comes through and she sees him in the living room, and he looks stressed out. So she's already imagining that he's a victim. And so she wants to be in good relationship with him. So she's going to rescue him out of his victim place and save him from the dilemma that he didn't even know he had. So she walks over to him, and without saying anything, she grabs him by the shoulders and starts rubbing. And she knows he's really tense, so she's going to give him a really good shoulder rub. And he yells out, "Ouch! You're hurting me! Knock it off!" And so we can see that the rescuer rescuing the victim, suddenly now she's got her feelings hurt and she's transitioned into the victim role. And when the husband yelled at her, he became the persecutor. And so so quickly this shifts. And then what happens next is she defends herself and says, "Well, I was only trying to help." And so now this person who entered as rescuer quickly became the victim. Now she's yelling at her husband and she's the persecutor. And so he says, you know, now that she's the persecutor yelling at him, "I was only trying to help." Well, now he's the victim. He's being yelled at. And he says, "Well, I don't like it when you do that. Why don't you think before you hurt me?" And so then he's shifted again out of the victim role into the persecutor and made her the victim. And the gender roles here don't matter. It could be any dynamic, you know, maybe a husband is fixing a faucet when what his wife wanted was to be in connection with him. So she doesn't express appreciation that he did chores, and then he resents her for not appreciating him. And then they can go round and round and round. Okay, so then what do we do about it? So what we see next is some tips for getting out of the rescue triangle, and in so doing, having the possibility of moving into some sort of healthy communication and relationship. So it can be really helpful to recognize you're in a role, to say, "Ooh, I really felt like the victim when you rubbed my shoulders or dragged me across the street. And I didn't ask for that, and I didn't want it. So I have an opportunity to tell you what it is that I do want." And so at MEN, we strongly recommend to our participants that they ask for 100% of what they want 100% of the time. And we strongly caution them to be aware that sometimes you'll get what you ask for and sometimes you won't. And so it's always okay to say what it is that you're wishing for. But if you think you're always going to get it, then that's a bit of a trap where you're inviting a conflict. It's going to be a rescue triangle. If you ask for what you want and you think you're going to get it, and then you blame somebody else when you don't, well, then there you are in the victim persecutor roles. So some things people can do, we can think about the examples. In the example with the Boy Scout, he could have asked the woman if she wanted help. And when she said, "No, thank you," he could have just said, "Okay, I respect your wishes." Or he might even express curiosity. "Well, why don't you want me to help you?" And she could say, "Because I don't want to cross the street. I'm waiting here for a bus on this side," right? Or, you know, with the example of one spouse rubbing the shoulders of another spouse, you might say, "You look really tense, and I would like to see you relaxed. Would you like a shoulder rub?" And maybe the spouse can say, "No, I'm sore and I'm tender." Or they might say, "Yes, but could you do it softly?" And so in this way, people can say what they want, and they can be clear with one another about that. So the rescue triangle tends to come up when people are doing each other favors that aren't really solicited or wanted. So that's sort of the two sides of it, you know, to be able to say what it is that you do want, and to, before you do someone a favor, to see if it's something that they're interested in. And then if you find yourself in the rescue triangle, to be able to say, you know, if I'm feeling like a victim right here, then maybe I need to say out loud that I don't like what's happening and I'd like for it to stop. And that doesn't need to be a fight. It's okay to say preferences. "I don't like what's happening. I would like something different to happen." Or if you're feeling like rescuing somebody, to check in, to notice, okay, I'm in the rescuer role, and And so check in, is that person wanting what I'm bringing? Or if you find yourself in the persecutor role, or you imagine that another person is in the persecutor role, it's possible to move into some kind of communication to explore that too. Like, do you like the way that I'm showing up in relationship right now? No? Okay, then I have a chance to do something different. Or if I'm imagining that you're a persecutor, I'm able to express that there's something going on that I don't like. And if I'm not attached to having all the results that I want, that can be a pretty good way to engage with another person. Okay, so that completes my presentation of the rescue triangle. That's one example of ways that we educate men and teach some new skills, maybe increase some self-insight, and is a good example of how we engage and gives you a feel for what we do at Men Involving Nonviolently. And if you know somebody who might be having difficulty in relationship, and maybe that includes some anger or some intense frustration, and that person is a man, please have them call MEN, Men Involving Nonviolently. Our phone number is 707-528-2MEN. That's 528-2636. And you can also contact us through sonomacountymen.org. Thank you. And hopefully this can stir up some interest in more people joining us and receiving the support that we have to offer.